everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Powerhouse Podcast, where we bring to you the powerhouses in the mitochondrial world. I'm your host, Brian Harman, President and CEO of the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. And I'm joined by UMDF's very own Dr. Phil.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for being with us, Phil. I know it's certainly a busy time for you, as we talked in the last podcast about this convergence of activity happening around our symposium and fundraising events. And I know we keep putting together some just really great pieces as all part of that, particularly with the symposium coming up here.
Yeah, no, it's always an exciting time, stressful time, but it's really great stuff that we're working on. And so we're really excited to be advancing some new programs. We're going to have a chance to update people on some of the traditional programs UMDF has always been involved with. And for our scientific community, we're already one session in on the scientific platform, and we've got the second session tomorrow. Well, I guess this will be, it'll already be over by then, but we have 2 in May and 2 in June. And then we'll head into more of the programming around clinical trial updates and infrastructure projects and a few other topics there. So it's coming together slowly but surely, Brian.
Yeah, so much great content continues to be kicked out from our partners. And we're so grateful to have our corporate partners join us in providing this great information for patient families, clinicians, researchers, et cetera. And of course, you can check out umdf.org/symposium to register. At the last count I just checked, we're nearing like 500 registrants already for this. So, when we say this is the largest mitochondrial medicine meeting in the world, we mean it. And that's still growing. We're still a couple weeks out from this event happening.
Yeah,
so
it's really
be sure to check that out.
It's really impressive when you think that we've had to pivot right to this virtual model over the last couple of years, but it just goes to show the community sees the benefit right in coming together, even if it is in a virtual form as opposed to in person. But it's still important, right, to get together all the stakeholders and talk about what are the most important things going on right now, and more importantly, from the patient community, help understand what's most important to them, so we can continue to deliver mission.
Well, we know you all are hungry for information, and we're here to provide it. And, another great piece of this event every year, this is our 3rd year of our Big Pitch Accelerators Finals. We've been talking about this. This is the award we give out to promising postdoctoral fellows who submit their research projects through our grant review process. We select 3 finalists who get to make their pitch, where our donor community gets to vote on the project they feel most passionate about. And Phil, the last we talked, we were in the closing days of selecting the finalists, and we got the 3 finalists.
It's done. We've got the 3 finalists. I'm really excited about that. It's a great slate of finalists. And, important to me, I think from a scientific point of view, our SMAB, feels very strongly. Any of these projects are fundable. They're good science. So really now it is a question of, where does our donor community feel attached, right? Which one kind of excites them the most, and we'll select the Accelerator Prize. So the slate is selected, and now it's recording and getting ready for the end of June.
Great. Well, be sure to check out our website under Get Involved with our Accelerators program. You can see we'll be posting here real soon some summaries of the project, some highlights, profiles of the researchers, a great donor engagement opportunity. And of course, there's still an opportunity to become an accelerator yourself. So you're going to check that out as well. And as I mentioned before, all this great programming, it cannot be driven without the generous support of our community. And of course, there's so much happening from a fundraising standpoint. We're proud to be a charity that is a charity of choice for so many folks in our community, and we can't do it without you. Our Spring Energy for Life season is well underway. Our friends in Pittsburgh, St. Louis, San Francisco, they all have walks coming up in June. And what's really great, again, a pivot from the fact that we had to cancel so many events because of the pandemic, we launched a national walk as well, too. So if there is a walk, if you don't have a walk in your market, you have the opportunity to support the national walk. And speaking of support, again, our friends at Zogenix have come through to be a national partner of our EFL. We're so grateful for that support. And you can always learn more at energyforlifewalk.org. And a really great opportunity in the fundraising realm right now as well, too. We are right smack dab in the middle of a matching gift, a $25,000 matching gift from a very generous patient family, who is matching dollar for dollar up to $25,000 between now and June 16th when you make a gift to UMDF. And we're talking so much about fundraising here today because it's a big year for us. This is our 25th anniversary at UMDF, and it has been driven by volunteers and donors and a community who have made mito patients a priority. So we want to make sure you all know about all of those opportunities to support UMDF. Helps us continue to bring really great programming together. And Phil, what it really does is helps us become really innovative. And that's what I'm excited about today's guest. Right. I know we're going to introduce here Dr. Ethan Pearlstein here in a minute, today's guest. But Phil, I know you and Dr. Perlstein have had a great relationship over the past couple of years, kind of, being able to talk at a very high level about mitoscience and opportunities for patient families. And boy, I'm excited to have him on today.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, what's great about Ethan is he's always thinking about the patients first, right? How do we advance research, but do it in a way that's putting the interests of the patients first? And he's been a great collaborator and certainly a resource for me as we talk about various projects that are going on in the community. And we're fortunate to have him be a part of our disease community.
Well, over the course of the last decade, and first as a graduate student at Harvard University in the Department of Molecular and Cell Biology with PhD advisor Professor Stuart Schreiber, and then as an independent postdoctoral fellow at the Lewis Sigler Institute at Princeton, Dr. Perlstein developed an approach to studying old drugs and discovering new drugs in model organisms called evolutionary pharmacology. Remind me to come back to that, Phil. I have a lot to learn around evolutionary pharmacology. He's the author of 19 peer-reviewed scholarly publications, including the discovery of a novel mechanism of action for the antidepressant Zoloft. So when we talk about the whole point of this podcast of just welcoming interesting people in the mitochondrial disease and rare disease space, this is my prototype right here. So without further ado, we welcome into the Powerhouse Podcast, Dr. Ethan Pearlstein. Ethan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to this.
Well, we're really excited to have you on today for many reasons. Selfishly, an education for myself. I have a feeling that Dr. Phil, who is a chemist by PhD trade, and Ethan, with your background, you guys will have so much great things to talk about and share with our viewers and listeners today. And I'm going to pop in, apologies to Mr. Miller, my 10th grade science teacher. We didn't go real deep into a lot of this stuff. So I'm anxious to learn today as well, too.
Well, there'll be extra credit opportunities today.
Oh, perfect. Hopefully not a test, but if there is, I will do my best. Well, Ethan, I've been, talking up your background so much before I even had a chance to give you an opportunity to talk here. I'd love to kick it off there. Walk us through a little bit of how you got to where you are today as CEO of Perlara.
Yeah, so reading through that intro, that bio, I realized that some of that, come a long way, I think, since grad school and giving yeast to Zoloft. And so, yeah, I mean, today I consider myself a cure Sherpa. I'm happy to go into what I think that means. And I also consider myself a biotech company builder and an evolutionary pharmacologist as well. But yeah, I'm thinking back on my journey, it was really meeting a mom of a child with a rare disease that really kind of opened my eyes to this long tail problem, right? All these tiny little genetic disease communities. And when talking to this parent, I realized, wow, this person sounds like a scientist. It sounds like they have a PhD. And I asked, what's your background? Oh no, I'm in tech or something. And that just dawned on me that, wow, if you really kind of team up with the most entrepreneurial and determined patient advocates and parents and families, you can't find a better partner to do drug development with, I think. At least that was kind of the value proposition and the origin of Perlara. But yeah, that's a little bit more about me, but I'm happy to kind of dive into this conversation. Really, really excited by UMDF's work. Been following, the work of the foundation for many years and met Phil, I don't know, 5 years ago or so-ish now, and been in touch and working on projects since. So yeah, really, really am honored to be a guest on the Powerhouse.
And you've had certainly one of the highlights of your career is spending time both in the academic arena and now into the public benefit side, private side, and maybe touch on that a little bit too. I'm curious when we get to meet friends who've kind of seen it all in that space. Love to just get some of your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of live at this intersection, of company building, of really, as I kind of call them, highly motivated, parents, entrepreneurial parents, and foundations, and really this community building. Because I think pharma, we talk about patient first all the time, but sometimes that kind of rings a little bit hollow. And I think where the rubber hits the road is, especially in the area of the long tail of diseases, it's the parents who are agitating and are trying to say, hey, I know what the science says today, but I still believe there's something possible that can be done, whether it's a cure, whether it's a treatment. I believe something's possible. So I really like to live in that space where you're constantly reminded of the urgency of why does the biopharma industry exist? It exists to serve these unmet needs, and to make medicines. And so I just love being at that intersection of the urgency of the parents and the families and the foundations, and the bleeding edge of science. Because I hate to say it this way, but I don't think there's ever been a better time to be alive and have to sort of mount a cure odyssey. Because if you God forbid you have a loved one who's affected by a disease, we live in a world today where there are just options that just didn't even exist a few years ago, or things that felt like science fiction. So I just love being an intersection of the urgency and the cutting edge of technology, and then just trying to bring the two together.
Yeah, but it's a message that we're often sending to our disease community, and of course it applies to the thousands of other disease communities too. Hope, right? It's a really hopeful time. These tools that are being developed that literally allow genetics to be edited at the molecular level, right, to fix problems. It's of course going to take some time, right, to get to clinical applications and work those out. But these are really just emerging, right, in the last half decade, and we've just scratched the surface in terms of the potential of these new tools.
Totally.
Well, you can tell too, Ethan, this is just the way you speak passionately about this. It's clearly woven into the values of Perlara as a company. And I'd like to dive into that a little bit to learn more about Perlara, the concept of the Pearl Quest, and so the origin story of your company.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Perlara is being reborn now. So I'm like building the same company the second time around, which is kind of cool. The first time around, it was built like a traditional kind of drug discovery platform startup company. And what I mean by that is, I recruited a team. We had a lab. We were in the Bay Area, which is where a lot of biotech companies operate. And we set ourselves up as a public benefit corporation or a PBC. In fact, Perlara is still the first biotech PBC. There's others that have come along the way, but that was something important for us to sort of, again, a lot of companies talk about being patient first. We wanted to actually put our money where our mouth was. But that was sort of the first version of Perlara and what I call Perlara 1.0. And that kind of culminated in this concept of a Pearl Quest. And a Pearl Quest is basically a collaboration between Perlara and a highly motivated and determined family or foundation that wants to pursue a cure odyssey. We all know about the diagnostic odyssey, right? Like, what is the gene and the mutation responsible for the disease? Well, the cure odyssey comes next. That's saying, I want to do something about it. I'm not just going to accept the natural history or whatever we're told. So this Pearl Quest model, we in the context of Perlara 1.0, very successful in terms of finding lots of foundations, families that wanted to do that. The wrinkle was that it was really expensive to operate in the Bay Area, and kind of getting on the VC funding treadmill and trying to succeed at that is difficult to do, especially as a first timer, as I was in biotech. So lots of complicated reasons, but basically the Perlara 1.0 experiment kind of came to a close, and there was one little sort of kernel of insight that was remaining from Perlara 1.0 that became what's called Maggie's Pearl, which is this joint venture, which was always kind of the idea, is that the Pearl Quest would be this research collaboration, and then at some point we would find something clinically actionable, even something commercially viable, like in terms of IP, and then the Pearl Quest would kind of mutate or evolve into a what we call a joint venture, or basically just an entity that would be co-owned by Perlara and the family or foundation that was funding the PearlQuest. And then this joint venture would be created to then move a particular IP or discovery forward to the clinic. So Perlara 1.0 experiment, lots of things didn't work. The one thing that did work was finding a really, really good partner family and having the science work out, and then being able to realize that you could create a drug company together, even though neither family nor Perlara had ever made a drug company before. So now Perlara 2.0, as I call it, is decentralized. So all of the things that we kind of did the first time around are now flipped on its head. So instead of so the PearlQuest still exists. We're still working with very motivated entrepreneurial families, but instead of centralizing all the research into one lab that Perlara signs a lease on, and instead of focusing on drug repurposing and model organisms, which is just one sort of line of attack, now Perlara 2.0 is sort of everywhere and anywhere. So I'm in this process of hiring what I call cure Sherpas. I remember this is a term I kind of used to describe myself, in all respect to the original culture, that came up with the word Sherpa, really mean it in the sense of you're looking up at this really tall mountain, and you're like, I need to get to the top. And how do I get there? And so you need scientists, people that I'm calling cure Sherpas, to guide you and to inform that journey, because it's a treacherous path to take alone, even with a guide. And there's no guarantee of success. But I think this idea that that families need help, and there's no shortage of families, no shortage of foundations either. And you realize actually there's no shortage of scientists out there. So now Perlara, I think, is about kind of making this kind of matching, where we want to take cure Sherpas, pair them up with families and foundations that need to get up the mountain, and then develop cure roadmaps together. Some of these can be very individualized. This is stuff that maybe we'll get to sort of in this conversation here, where you can maybe even make a tailored plan for one patient. Of course, you want to expand beyond just one, but you could start that way, because that's where a family or a foundation is most motivated around their disease, their child even. And you can sort of now have this decentralized biotech where you've got families that want to make drugs, and you've got scientists who want to help, and you can kind of take advantage of labs that already exist, contract research labs, academic labs. You can activate a network of labs to do the research, so you don't have to do it under one roof necessarily. And then I think the decentralized theme can kind of play on from there. But I think the bottom line is Perlara has gone through this evolution, where we've definitely been in the trenches, working directly with families and foundations, pushing on research, realizing that there's limitations to how that can work if you're going to do that, where you're having folks pay you to do it, and you have to make sure you're paying for the cost. And so there, to get that to be profitable is really challenging. So I think what's interesting is now, like a lot of companies born in the pandemic, Perlara 2.0 will be remote first. It will be distributed. It will be kind of have this global sort of, reach kind of from the beginning, almost like a tech company, because cure Sherpas and families can connect the way we are right now. That's what the pandemic has proven. Anyway, long-winded answer to say, I think, there's so much innovation happening in the rare disease, genetic disease space, not just the science, but also the business models and the kind of operating models. And so Perlara is kind of experimenting on all of those fronts. But I think now we've settled on something that's a lot more stable as a model, and excited to see where it can grow.
But it's definitely a disruptive approach, right? And that's part of what makes it so interesting, is it's not just a continuation of doing drug development necessarily the way it's always been done. And I was wondering if maybe you could just speak briefly to the difference between, putting a roadmap together for developing treatments and cures for thousands, millions, tens of millions, heart disease, hypertension, right? Cancer for that matter, and contrast that with, as you said, bringing it all the way down to a so-called N of one roadmap. So for one person, their genotype, even their phenotype, right, associated with it. Maybe you could just, compare, contrast a little bit the approaches that are taken, to achieve those goals.
I mean, if you're thinking about the N of one, what that really does afford you is the possibility to kind of really come up with interventions that attack the root cause of disease, and even the root cause of that patient's disease, right? Because you can imagine approaches that are very mutation targeted, where you say this patient has a mutation that's not really seen in other patients. And so you could, an N of one strategy would say, if we really want to make a big difference for this one patient, then we need to really personalize the interventions. And there are now options available, experimental therapeutic options available that can target individual mutations, even private mutations. Like take, for example, the so-called antisense oligonucleotides, right? These ASOs. These are an example of a programmable therapy. I think programmable is going to be kind of a word of the year. I mean, the COVID vaccines, the mRNA vaccines are programmable. So I think when you go into N of 1, it affords you, unlike with the large N, it affords you this ability to kind of take these mutation targeted approaches and avail yourself of these experimental frontline, types of modalities, things like base editing, right? Things that might change a single mistake, a single typo in your genome. Those kinds of medicines weren't even a concept a couple of years ago. And now they're actually labs that will build a prototype base editor for you for your specific mutation. So when you take that N of 1 approach, the advantage is that you have a chance to really snuff out the disease at its source, whether that's to correct the mutation that's driving the disease, or other modalities that act sort of that can act a little bit more downstream, but still kind of intercept the disease biology at its core. And when you take that N of 1 approach, you allow yourself to get really creative and really targeted. And the hope is that when you go through that exercise, it won't just benefit that N of 1.
Right. I was going to ask you to comment on, if you think about it, UMDF, 25 years at this, right? In terms of funding research, providing support, education, advocacy, all the things that we're so proud of talking about. And part of what excites me in these conversations is that we talk about like real innovation. It requires an organization like ours to be thinking outside of the ways we've traditionally done things. And that's why we like having partnerships with folks like you, Ethan. Talk to me a little bit about, the kind of pitch to the big PAGs on how an N of 1 strategy has a halo effect for the research and drug development community.
Yeah, because I think as the big umbrella group, you feel you don't want to leave anybody behind. But then you're kind of, if you really want to make an impact and on an urgent time scale, you have to kind of go deep. And so that's where the N of 1 presents itself, I think, as a nice kind of balancing act where you're able to sort of take one case and show if we can go deep on that case, then we think there's ways that can be generalized and that we can take that N of 1 learning and scale it up. So I think there's probably, I get it, there's a natural maybe resistance to the idea if you're an umbrella group and you want to serve many communities that you would want to single out one. Because what are the bioethics of that? And you can go down a rabbit hole. You could, or you could just say, let's accept the fact that maybe some individual families, are better fundraiser than others, or some families might have a gene or a mutation that's more amenable to a particular therapy. And it's just the reality. And it's not fair, but it's just the reality. I would say maybe the big umbrella groups could take advantage of that reality and say, let these pioneers pioneer, because nothing's really going to stop them. And they might go rogue and might go solo, and you don't necessarily want to lose that energy to the ether. You want those folks working in an ecosystem. And so I think if you can get over that initial sort of maybe that hesitation to say, well, we don't want to single out one group because we represent so many and we need to come up with solutions that don't just benefit one. I think the way you flip it on its head is to say, well, the way you get to those general solutions is by doing these prototypes and these pilot experiments and these things that are explicitly done with an eye toward expanding if they work. That's the balancing act.
So Phil, you've had the pleasure of helping us navigate through this a little bit. I was hoping you would comment.
Absolutely. It's some of my favorite conversations with Ethan over the years, right? It's just kind of thinking about the flexibility an organization like ours or even larger organizations have to be able to demonstrate while still being true to we're trying to advance the overall field, right, from a scientific point of view or any component of our mission. And as Ethan said, it can be tricky, but I think we have to go in eyes wide open. And I'm a big believer in piloting and trying things out. And that's where, again, Ethan's been such a great partner, is that he's willing to try some things too. So we are in fact piloting right now, such a project where it's really an N of 1 roadmap. We're working with a family that has raised money through the UMDF, and they really were very interested, right, in pursuing one of these roadmap projects very focused on their child and the form of mitochondrial disease they've had. So, Ethan, maybe in general terms, we could talk a little bit about the process of starting a roadmap, right? There's a little bit of background work that has to be done, like any scientific project, go to the literature, see what's known, what's not known, finding out who might have models where that you can take advantage of, right? And
it's detective work. It's detective work, right? It's like, and it's no AI or computer can do that yet for us. Right. Like you have to go in there and say, what's the gene of interest? So there's many different mitochondrial disease genes. So you type in one of them right into PubMed, right, which is like the database that scientists use to search the published scholarly literature. I mean, there's really no shortcut to the roadmap exercise. You have to type in that gene and you have to read all the papers and digest them, and then sort of say to yourself, okay, here's the landscape about this gene. Here's kind of what's known about its normal biology. Here's what's known about the disease, biology. And then you kind of, from there, very quickly say, well, what different therapeutic modalities, and that's just a fancy word for saying like classes of drugs. We've got small molecule drugs, we've got gene therapy drugs, we've got antisense oligonucleotide. So the roadmap is, after you've digested the literature about what's known about this gene and what's not known, then you could start saying, well, what known medicines and modalities would be a good fit for this disease? And even again, a good fit for a particular mutation. Right. We can get down to that the therapies that are available today, are mutation targeted, and some of them are mutation agnostic. But you can literally target a mutation that may not be seen in any other patient in the world. That's kind of the state of where we are today. But I think ultimately, the exercise of kind of deciding to go down the N of one path, once you've kind of assimilated the literature and decided here's like a drug repurposing strategy, here's a gene editing strategy, here's a gene therapy replacement strategy. As you kind of go down and see what options are on the table or off the table based on what is known, then you kind of sort of encapsulate that into the roadmap, and then you say, here are the various tracks we're going to pursue. And you also have to realize maybe there is some capacity building that needs to happen. Maybe we don't have enough disease models, and we need to have cellular disease models. We want to have animal disease models, both small and large animals. You need to know what your gaps are. The roadmap also considers things like, what's the status of patient registries? What's the status of natural histories? Like, if you were to do a trial for this mitochondrial disease subtype, what would you be measuring as the outcome to show that your drug or intervention was working, right? How would you be able to take advantage of a patient's own baseline, right? And say, this is what the patient looked like before treatment, here's what happened after treatment, and be able to convince yourself that if you did that with enough N of ones, that there was something real there, right? So I think this is kind of, this is where we are today, is these N of one pathways are available. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, you might have only said to somebody, maybe there's maybe there's repurposing, but we don't really, it was sort of just like wishy-washy. Or maybe there's gene therapy, you should pursue gene therapy, but without any sort of more guidance than that.
Yeah, no, it's really changed, right, rapidly. And, I think, these various tracks that you describe that come out of the roadmap of various approaches, those also help inform the kinds of collaborators and partners you need, right? Because it's never just about the Sherpa and the foundation and the family. It's who you can wrap around them, right, with a specific skill set or capability. And quite often, right, I'd say historically, academia, right, has been the place where research really took place. But increasingly now, there's an ecosystem of contract research organizations that have these skills on staff, right? And they're willing to sort of be mercenaries of sorts, right? Like
scientists for hire.
Scientists, maybe that's a better term, right? Yeah, scientists for hire, and that they know how to advance these early stage drug development programs, and they've got the resources in place. That can translate to a much more capital efficient approach than that even a family, right, could say that's within our means, right, of our fundraising to advance it, perhaps to the point where something's ready to move to the clinic.
And the other advantage, exactly.
Ethan, as you've been spending some more time in the, with the project we've been working together on, spending time in the mitochondrial disease space, I just want to kind of dive into that a little bit. Just your general hope, what excites you when we talk about mitochondrial disease and these strategies. Hoping you can comment on that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that mitochondrial disease collectively are a huge sort of burden. We know that mitochondrial biology touches sort of many other biological processes, even the natural aging process. So I think it's hard not to get excited about mitochondrial biology and just all the potential places you could go with it. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to sort of talk about specific, I guess, areas where mitochondrial disease understanding would go just beyond these maybe pediatric diseases to something sort of, I mean, I think where, especially on the longevity and an aging side of things, I mean, that is itself becoming a topic of more interest these days. And I think, any discussion about aging longevity inevitably, like the roads come back to not just Rome, they all come back to mitochondria. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, it's sort of like, is there a fountain of youth at the other end here? Is it are mitochondria floating in the fountain of youth? So I don't know. I think those kinds of questions are the things that, are the kind of the deep motivators of like scientific curiosity and just what are the potential of these, essentially, again, the powerhouse of the cell. I mean, you think about how would we improve, cells, how would we improve human physiology? One dial to tune in turn might very well be mitochondria. So I think the thesis that I've sort of developed is that if you can, pediatric rare mitochondrial diseases are horrible, and we are a huge unmet need, and we want to direct lots of resources, therapeutic resources, to tackling these rare pediatric, mitochondrial diseases. And I think if you do it, you set yourself up to then build up a knowledge base that will be useful for aging, health span extension. I mean, obviously, other concrete diseases areas have been implicated with mitochondrial dysfunction. But I think, generally speaking, if you invest a lot of time and effort into understanding the pathways and how you fix mitochondrial pathways, it will have benefit for kids suffering from rare pediatric mitochondrial diseases today, and then it will also have benefit, I think, knock-on effects for these sort of larger disease indications, even something like aging, which doesn't necessarily always get called or described as a disease, but certainly it is a process that decays over time, and mitochondria are sort of front and center.
Yeah, I always like to remind our community that this is a differentiator, right? There are many rare diseases or rare disease communities that wish they had that kind of connection, that they're not on an island of just one single gene or one defect. The fact that we have this opportunity to learn by fixing these defects that are inherited that result in primary mitochondrial disease, and potentially apply them then to addressing mitochondrial dysfunction in many other larger disease populations. This is a real differentiator. We need some early successes, and that's part of the reason why this sort of personalized approach is really exciting, because we know, right, we get the first one across the goal line with the FDA, and there's a label associated with mitochondrial disease. It completely de-risks, the obvious starting point of these rare inherited disorders. And then the larger players can start to think about, okay, how do I come in and utilize something like that to perhaps address metabolic diseases or neurodegenerative diseases or diseases of aging, like you described.
That's right. The N of one is the battering ram, right?
Yeah,
it's to say that if you go through, then everyone else is sitting on the sidelines. In fact, the people who should have the courage to go through, like the biopharma companies, they're waiting for the families really to take on that risk and to get, breach the wall. Get a slight breach, and you've seen it now in multiple disease communities again and again, from Duchenne muscular dystrophy to spinal muscular atrophy to Niemann-Pick type C. As soon as there's one entrant in the arena, everybody else floods in. And you might think to yourself, my God, why is these rare diseases getting so much attention? And it's like, you'd think that, well, why are companies doing this? It's a small market. How can they, if you have more competitors going after a small market, that doesn't make any, but that's not the way the logic works. The logic works more along the lines of, once you get that first indication, as Phil said, once FDA has said, we have blessed this clinical protocol and all the other things that came before it, right? Then that's what really gives the comfort level to all the other people who have been sitting idle to say, I'm willing to now put money in.
Yeah, the levee breaks with that. Yeah,
the levee breaks. So
yeah.
again and again and again. And again, I think what you're noticing though is that sometimes it's at the tip of the spear. It's an N of one family. And I think what's interesting about this instance is that you've got kind of this, the umbrella group working hand in hand with the individual family. Whereas in other cases, that family might have just gone rogue. The family might have just said, you know what, we're going to just not be encumbered by the past or anything else, and we just want to move. And so I think the balance here is that, again, you can tell your trustees, you can tell the bigger community that this N of one is worth it because it acts as this battering ram. And we know from other disease communities that biopharma and a bunch of other dominoes fall as soon as somebody breaks the ice. And an N of one family is the perfect kind of vehicle for that, because you have a group that's very determined, someone who's not going to take no for an answer. These are exactly the type of people you want who kind of breach the wall.
Well, Phil, I think, we certainly recognize this is one of the big challenges of an organization like ours as we head into our next 25 years. And listen, I want to do nothing more than put us out of business in less time than that. If that's our goal, then we're all up for that. But being mindful that here's the reality: the world's getting smaller, right? It's easier to connect with people who are on like missions. And I think about, between the N of one strategy and the kind of mitochondrial dysfunction, the connection outside of disease, where in my short time, this organization, just 3 years, I'm in many meetings where we sit around and we talk about it. And what's exciting to me is that real deliverables coming out, because the world getting a little bit smaller here. And admittedly, for an organization like ours, it requires us to be agile and smart and being mindful of the broader community that we support. That's why I'm excited that we've been able to pilot some things with Ethan. And, again, I think it's just something that we'll have to keep our eye on, Phil, as we move forward the next one.
Well, Brian, you rightly describe them as challenges, but they're also opportunities, right? And I think if you embrace it as an opportunity, then the organization naturally evolves and we improve, right, in terms of our delivery of mission. And that's obviously what we're here to do. And I can't thank Ethan enough as a collaborator. I learn in every discussion, including this one, just the sort of the mindset that it requires to be that battering ram, right? And not to necessarily just stay in the lane of how it's always been done, but what can we accomplish if we do a little bit of disrupting too? And it's achieving the balance, but that's the fun of it. And I really believe ultimately we're going to deliver back to the community real treatments that are meaningful to the patient community through this kind of process. So, thank you, Ethan, for all the collaboration that's taken place there. I really look forward to continuing it in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, as we keep talking about this N of one and the balancing act with the bigger community, again, as we talk about this and just seeing all the different ways where, an N of one isn't just something that, if it's done right, it will absolutely have cascading effects, right? Even if it's just like we set up the contract and the paperwork and the template is there for how you do this. So that for the second N of one,
made it easier for the second one.
It just got easier just for that alone, since you already, and then so many other ways where having done it the first time and getting all the kinks out means that the second and the third time around will then benefit from those efficiencies. So I think that's really, if there's still any holdouts to this idea that if you're within a big umbrella group that represents lots of interests and you feel this tension with individual N of one folks within that community, I think don't run away from that. Run toward it and realize that this is actually a perfect opportunity to pilot something, a new kind of experiment.
Well, you get all the wraparound services of an organization like UMDF as well, too. Like, what's exciting about this, to bring to bear just some of the great support and outreach, expertise, connections. It's what made this organization tick for over 25 years. And, adding in these innovative layers on top of it is something that I think is an eye towards the future for our organization. And we're living a little bit of it right now, which is great. So one thing that hasn't evolved is my vocabulary today, Ethan. I wrote down, these are great, and we're going to use them. A lot of this, the visual of the battering ram.
I don't want to have violent imagery, but
perfectly described.
It needs to be like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. We're trying to get in at the end, right?
Now you've softened it with the cure Sherpa, right? So
exactly.
We talk about this all the time. Part of our job as a PAG, as a patient advocacy group, is I want people knowing that we wake up every day. We're the ones helping kick down those doors, right? There's a point of this where it's not polite, right? Our families can't wait.
Right.
And so we like that kind of imagery. And I love this idea of the Cure Sherpa too, this idea with all this, it's all about navigation for patient families, whether you're dealing with one or you're dealing with 75,000, whatever that looks like, right? We all need that type of support and navigation. I was going to ask you next, Ethan, what this is a big question.
Okay.
I just want to know what your dreams are. Like you're the kind of guy just seems like you do whatever you can to make your dreams come true. Like what's next for you? Like what are the things that we haven't talked about today that are kind of in your big horizon?
I mean, definitely continuing on this theme of if you put some effort into N of one, it's a down payment on N of more or N of many. And just like continuing to run with that thesis. And also I mentioned it earlier, I think this other big trend that's happening is decentralization, right? Is the fact that we can now, kind of have creative teams that are battering rams for big problems, and they're distributed. Their members are living in different places. They're not permanently co-located. So yeah, I think to me, it's the future that I'm really excited about is as those worlds continue to collide, the worlds of N of one to more, and how the long tail of disease circles back on itself if you keep going down that path. And then this decentralization trend, which is really just another form of democratization of biotech, where unlikely characters, people who aren't like the people who have run biotech companies before, who are the ones who are anointed to run future biotech companies. Like this is a world where outsiders and people who weren't supposed to be here are in the room, in the boardroom, and they've got the gavel. And so I just continue to love being at the intersection.
Well, we're glad you're at the intersection with us. The spirit of the Powerhouse podcast is to bring in the powerhouses of this space, of the mitochondria space. And clearly we're lucky to have a mind like yours as part of this. We're grateful for your partnership, Ethan, and keeping us on our toes. Like we want people who will challenge us to think in different ways, that we all share the same goal, right, of doing what's best for our patient families. On that note, this is a question I ask all of our guests. I'm always interested in people's backgrounds and their vision and how they got to where they are today. I want to hear about the influences in your life. Like, who are the powerhouses in your life that kind of keep your machine humming?
Well, definitely family, and just an inspiration, to me, and things that give me a purpose for why am I putting all this time into science and helping others. It's because I want my family to be proud of me, and I want them to also see that this is you can do important work in life, and that involves in some way or another helping someone else if you can. So yeah, I definitely couldn't do this without family support, and then of course there's just too many other sort of founders to credit, because if you're a founder and you're a biotech, it's a tight-knit community of other founders, and having the support of other people building who are also taking big leaps and also are passionate and infectiously passionate about their thing. Like there's too many of those folks to credit, but yeah, it's that sort of second startup family out there has been so supportive, and everyone who has gone and now that I've had a chance to become an investor in companies, it's also great to have that sort of two-way street. But yeah, it's family, whether it's your blood or your startup, your colleagues in the trenches. Those are the people that have made me who I am.
Well, always appreciate our friends sharing that. And Ethan, we're delighted to have you as part of our family. And this is a mission that takes so many different types of minds and thoughts and strategies. And clearly we benefit from having you be a part of that. So thank you so much. Phil, I know this is something that you wake up every day getting excited about, just thinking differently, and these kind of conversations are what make your day tick. But maybe put a bow on this for us.
Yeah, 100%. And write it down, Brian. N of one, that's a down payment on N of many. I mean, you couldn't articulate it any more clearly of what we're trying to accomplish, right? By solving these localized problems, perhaps only in one child, one adult, but that's a down payment then on being able to address much larger groups of our mitochondrial disease patients. So that's what gets me juiced up to be involved with it every day. And I'll just echo Brian's comments. Thanks so much, Ethan, for everything you've contributed. And we really do look forward to those future collaborations. And best of luck, of course, with Perlara 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for having me. And I feel very blessed to be part of the mitochondrial disease community. And yes, we've got more to do.
Going.
Thanks so much, Ethan.
You're welcome. Have a great day, guys.
All right. Phil, I love how you said juiced up there at the end. Boy, that's the way I feel. Like, it's like a battering ram. Like, I'm ready to run through a brick wall. Like, there's just a certain energy you get out of folks like Ethan that, it's you can tell that's genuine, right? That is there.
Absolutely.
Living it every day.
100%. And, just natural leaders have that, right? As they're talking about it, you just feel yourself, getting ready to be, part of that battering ram, right? If I've got to be the one hit the wall, right? So be it. And I don't care if you're working in a nonprofit or, in an academic institution anywhere, a small business, you need to be surrounded by people that energize you and get you excited, right, about the opportunities that exist with it. Ethan really brings that to the table in spades on mitochondrial disease.
Yeah, certainly a powerhouse for us and for the community. And, it's a little inspiration for us too, as we head back and think about, as I mentioned before, our planning moving forward, right? This is what's exciting to me in this space right now is just the incredible clip of activity. It requires an organization like ours to keep pace at a minimum and be leaders, ideally. And I think there's so many great places where we're doing that, particularly because we're open to alliances and partnerships and being smart with that as well too.
No, that's the part I'm most proud of. Like, we've already demonstrated we're not going to be an organization that just sticks our head in the sand and says this is the way it's always been done. We're going to respect the past, and certainly we know that's delivered a lot of great contacts for us and a knowledge base around mitochondrial disease, particularly with our interactions with the patient community. But we've also got to break a couple things on the way to trying new ways of doing it too. If you try to be perfect, right, and threading the needle on these things, highly unlikely you'll be there. So you're going to have some mistakes, you're going to have some failures along the way, but ultimately we've kind of got the big vision out there of what we're trying to get to. And I've never been more confident in that vision that exists for UMDF and for our patient community, the hope that's part of that.
I'm thinking I need to get branded UMDF helmets for the staff, right? As we're inspired to be battering rams in many different ways that we can, right? Galvanizing our patient community, a staff that wakes up ready to do this every day, driven by the spirit of very passionate parents and patients who are counting on us. So I'm excited to go out and knock down some more walls.
Me too. We got to start thinking about who our Game of Thrones characters.
We've taken it too far today, Phil. But on that note, again, special thanks to our guest, Dr. Ethan Pearlstein of Perlara today. Don't forget to subscribe. You can catch all of our Powerhouse shows on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe there. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. It's the best spot to find all this great material. If you have not registered for our Mitochondrial Medicine Symposium yet, please check it out. This is a great hub of all this information, the latest and greatest and cutting edge information in mitochondrial medicine, along with just tremendous support resources for patient families. This is a real unique event where we bring together the world's experts and patient families. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, we're already north of 500 or so coming together on that. Incredible. So we're going to have a nice crowd to share on there. Again, thanks to Ethan. Thanks, Dr. Phil, for joining once again. Until next time, go fast.